this game has aged incredibly poorly, and it wasn't even all that good to begin with. This is way worse than I remember.
An overabundance of ambition, spoiled by a lack of focus. And in this case, what we got was a tedious, repetitive game that's mildly frustrating sometimes, and an absolute chore most of the time. Those bright spots are there, but they're way too few and way too far between.
By the fourth playthrough, I was absolutely bored and tired of this game. I play video games to have a good time, either by myself or with a group of friends, but Shadow the Hedgehog offers nothing to me. Nothing.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've got something to tell you. I think Shadow the Hedgehog is a great game. In fact, I don't just think that it's a great game, I consider it my favorite game of all time. No, I am not joking. Well, the fearless year of Shadow is nearing its end, and we're getting Sonic X Shadow Generations in addition to Shadow being included in the third Sonic movie. And I think it's now finally time for my long-awaited video, my review on 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog. I've gone on record saying that I think this game is really not as bad as people make it out to be. But one thing I have never said is that Shadow the Hedgehog is actually my favorite game of all time. I know, that's probably really baffling to hear. Out of all the amazing games out there, Kingdom Hearts 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man 2, I don't know why I keep listing sequels, but you get the picture. Out of all of those amazing games, why is this dumb little Sonic spin-off from 2005 my favorite? Well, before I get into the review, I need to get into my personal history with the game. So here's the thing. Some of you may find this hard to believe, but Shadow the Hedgehog was one of the first games I ever played. In fact, not only was it the first Sonic game I ever played, and the first shooter I ever played, but it was also the first game I ever played that was mature. I use mature in massive quotes there because, well, we'll get to that later. The point I'm trying to make is that my childhood gaming experience and overall childhood experience with media in general was kid-friendly crap like SpongeBob or Crash Bandicoot. So when I first saw the cover of Shadow the Hedgehog, I asked my cousin, "Hey, can we play this game?" And he told me no, the game has bad words. I don't exactly remember what happened next because I was like 4 years old, but I was eventually able to get him to cave in and let me at least watch him play the game. And I will never forget the first time I saw that intro cutscene. Now, if you're a longtime Sonic fan and you're used to the kid-friendly stuff that was shown in previous games, this intro cutscene is complete cringe. But put yourself into the mind of a child who's never played a Sonic game before and whose only experience with video games was Crash Bandicoot. This is the first thing you see. You see this figure loading a gun, it cuts to his shoes as he walks forward, and you see the dark silhouette of this anthropomorphic creature who pumps that shotgun in tune to a rock piece. God, I love this intro. It's so nostalgic. Every time I watch it, I have to play the game again. Not only because the CG is unbelievably amazing for 2005, but this was kind of my introduction to the Shadow character. And then we get to the story cutscenes. Now, I may have been 4 years old, but I was old enough to at least comprehend his story. I loved the tiny stories told in SpongeBob episodes, and the story of Shrek was very fun and emotional as it was my introduction to romance. Yeah, Shrek of all movies was my introduction to romance. I was an early 2000s kid, okay? Look, the point I'm trying to make here is that while the story may be bad and poorly written, you have to remember, I was a child when I first played this. This was kind of my introduction to this kind of story, and I didn't know that there were other Sonic games before this. In fact, I thought Shadow the Hedgehog was the main character of his own series, so when the intro cutscene began, I was immediately intrigued by what was going on. We see this hedgehog just standing in the middle of nowhere, wondering who he is. The only clues he has are his name and a traumatic memory of seeing a little girl getting shot and killed. Eventually, aliens start falling to the ground, Okay, even when I was little, I thought this was stupid. And even Shadow was like,
Look how pathetic they are. I don't have time for these humans.
but immediately our minds are changed when we see the leader of the aliens telling us that he knows who we are and can help us if we can find the mythical Chaos Emeralds. Finally, having clues to his mystery, this Shadow character decides to join in the fight, and from there on, it's up to you. Do you help Black Doom enslave the planet? Do you remain solo and find out that you're a robot? Or do you team up with Sonic and put an end to Black Doom's schemes in addition to killing him in cold blood? Oh wait, that's Eggman. And once we drop into the game, oh my god, do I get a surge of nostalgia just looking at this. I fell in love immediately when I first saw this. The music was dark and action-packed, the gunplay was awesome, you were fighting against aliens and soldiers, and depending on which allegiance you're on, your partner character will praise or scold you for killing the appropriate or inappropriate enemy. This was my introduction to the Sonic series. While everyone else was playing their Sonic 2s and Sonic Adventure 2s, I was playing this game, and oh did I fall in love. Now, the first copy of the game I played didn't belong to me, it was actually my cousin's, but my parents eventually did get me a copy of the game for the PS2. And I played it on and off. I tried very hard to get all of the endings, but I didn't really have the skill to do it. But over the years, I developed that skill, and well, now I'm super good at the game. In fact, I recently just unlocked Expert mode on my GameCube copy. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because, well, I'll have to admit, I do have a bit of a nostalgic bias when it comes to playing this game. However, if I were to take the nostalgic goggles off and look at the game with an adult lens, well, to be brutally honest with you, I'd still say it's a great game. Throughout the years, I've been replaying Shadow the Hedgehog, and that is because I believe it is one of the most replayable Sonic games in the entire series. With the multiple endings and multiple story paths you take, you can replay the game in any way you want, and that's one of the reasons why I really like the game. But obviously that's just a TLDR version. Obviously I have a lot more reasons why I like this game. So, why do I like this game so much, and why do I consider it my favorite? Well, let's get into that. I think the best place to start when talking about this game was its overall controversy. And in terms of controversy, I honestly don't even know where to begin. Well, I guess I'll start by saying this. If you dislike this game and consider it the worst Sonic game ever, that is completely fine by me. My goal here is to not change your opinion or call you an idiot for thinking that way. My goal here is to give you a different perspective, so to speak. Now, the one thing that I absolutely love about Shadow the Hedgehog is that it is a completely different kind of Sonic game. There's a big debate online on whether or not people consider Shadow the Hedgehog a spin-off game. A lot of people consider it mainline, and a lot of people consider it spin-off. Personally, I don't really care what you think, but if you're gonna put a gun to my head, I'd probably say that I'm on the side of saying that this is a spin-off game. Yes, the story may be a sequel to Sonic Adventure 2, but the gameplay is completely different from every Sonic game that we've had up to this point. And while this is completely subjective, I personally think this is a good thing. During development of this game, it was said that Yuji Naka got letters from Sonic fans to give Sonic a gun. He didn't think that giving Sonic a gun would be appropriate, but thought that Shadow would work, and I honestly agree. This is another thing that people meme on the game for. It gave Shadow a gun, and I know everyone says the same thing. You can't give an anthropomorphic cartoon character a realistic gun and expect people to take it seriously. But to counter that argument, the tone of Shadow the Hedgehog isn't like any other Sonic game. This isn't a bright and colorful Sonic game with upbeat happy music like in Sonic Adventure. This game is dark and gritty, and it runs with that tone very proudly to a very mixed result. Don't worry, we'll get to this later. And keep in mind, Shadow himself had a really dark backstory, so to give this dark character a gun, I really think it works. Now, do I think he should be given a realistic pistol? The biased part of me wants to say yes, because I think it does look badass, but on an objective standpoint, it doesn't work. Shadow should be given a gun that is a little more cartoony, and granted, this game does have cartoony guns. It's just that in a lot of the marketing and promo material for the game, it shows Shadow with realistic weapons that humans would use. Now, don't get me wrong, I love this, but I can kinda understand why people look at this and laugh. I honestly think that if the promo material showed off more cartoony weapons from the game, most people wouldn't meme on the idea of Shadow having a gun. At least that's just my opinion. Now, do I think that the tone shift was done perfectly?
Absolutely not!
Look, I don't deny that this game is dark and edgy tone-wise, but the story and writing try so hard to be dark and edgy and it just doesn't work. Look, there's a way to make a dark Sonic story work, but this is not a good example. You have characters saying minor curse words left and right, and it just feels so inappropriate and forced. Everyone always memes on the infamous, "Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald" line, and for good reason. But that's just the writing, and I'm not talking about it being inconsistent and all over the place. I kind of expected that from a game where you can choose your own pathway to lay out the story. I'm saying the stuff that happens in the story is not interesting, and some of it is just borderline BS. Like, you have this one moment in the story where Black Doom threatens the planet by use of the Eclipse Cannon, and he blows up the freaking White House with the president inside! But don't worry though, the president made it out unscathed. Look, I don't care if this is a cartoon video game, there is no freaking way that the president should have survived that, let alone making it out unscathed. You have this plot point in the story where we see this gun commander named Abraham Towers. Of course, you would only know that if you read the Archie comics, because his name isn't directly said in this game, which is kinda weird considering his importance to the story. Basically, he has a vendetta against Shadow for reasons unknown to the player at first. It's intriguing, and depending on your pathway, you only get bits and pieces regarding why he has a vendetta against Shadow. But once we get to the pathway that leads us to Shadow and Abraham meeting, we get his backstory, and it is the worst tragic backstory I've ever heard for a character. They don't even try. Basically, Abraham was one of the kids who was aboard the space colony Ark along with Maria. Maria and Abraham were said to be great friends, about on the same level of closeness that Shadow was with her. But because he was created and the gun raid happened, Abraham blames Shadow for this. Yes, the gun commander blames Shadow for the gun raid, not Professor Gerald, not Black Doom, not even the organization that caused the raid, aka the organization he works for. He blames Shadow. What a lame climax to a plot point that I found very intriguing as a kid. Also, what is he even doing on the Ark? What's the point of this? This was so dumb. But the worst offender is the ending. When Shadow finally defeats Devil Doom and sends the Black Comet back into orbit, the commander and the president saying that they were wrong about Professor Gerald and that they should honor his legacy, completely forgetting the fact that he wanted to use the Ark to destroy all of humanity in Sonic Adventure 2. Okay, I'd be here all day if I were to nitpick all of the negative aspects of the story, but the point I'm trying to make here is this. It's a bad story, and even as someone who loves this game, I cannot deny that. With that said though, my inner child goes nuts whenever I saw the cutscenes for this game. It felt like I was watching a longer Sonic X episode, and that's not just because the voice actors were from Sonic X. It's really got that shonen anime vibe, and my inner child just loves the tone and energy these scenes had. It just would have been better if it were assisted by good writing. Now, while the story may not be that good, what about the gameplay? You know, the thing that defines this as a game. Well, I'm happy to say here that what the game lacks in good storytelling makes up for having some kick-ass gameplay. Now, the gameplay in Shadow the Hedgehog is largely different than in previous Sonic games. While in previous Sonic games, your goal was to reach the end of the level as fast as you can while looking and cool as stylish as possible, this game is not like that. Shadow the Hedgehog is a fast-paced third-person shooter with a large emphasis on searching and destroying an X number of objects or enemies. Each playthrough has you travel through 6 levels. Each level has 2 or 3 sets of missions. Depending on which mission you do, you will go to a level either higher on the grid, lower on the grid, or just go dead center if you're feeling neutral. This system is one of the main reasons why people hate this game. But if you ask me, I think this is one of the best parts of the game. Yes, admittedly, it does get tedious playing Westopolis over a dozen times, and yes, you are going through the same levels from time to time. However, not every playthrough will be the same. Depending on which path and story route you take, you will go through different set of levels and witness a certain set of endings, and while this makes the story very sporadic and all over the place, it makes it very easy to come back to. And this is a good thing, because some days if I'm bored, I can just boot up Shadow the Hedgehog and play the game however I want to play. Now, what are these missions like? Well, mission objectives vary from level to level. While most missions involve you having to destroy an X number of enemies, some missions involve you having to chase and shoot down an alien tank, beating the level within a certain time limit, activating terminals, or collecting a large number of rings. A lot of people take issue with this design philosophy, saying that it makes the game very tedious and boring to play through, most particularly the missions where you have to find an X number of things. I've heard people complain that going on meaningless scavenger hunts is boring. However, I'd like to challenge this opinion. Don't get me wrong, I don't really care if people have a different opinion from me. But this is one I just honestly never understood, because you want to know some other great games that involve you going on tedious scavenger hunts? Let me just name a few. Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, Jak and Daxter, The Precursor Legacy, Donkey Kong 60... Okay, no, not that one. Look, the point I'm trying to make here is that I don't understand why people consider this as a derogatory thing when there are other games that do this too. I hate putting words into people's mouths, but whenever I watch a negative review of this game, I feel like the average person reviewing it wanted to play a game that played like Sonic. But like I said, this game doesn't play like your average Sonic the Hedgehog game, and this is why I consider Shadow the Hedgehog a spin-off. Shadow's gameplay is more oriented around action-based objectives. That's why when you go fast and you try to turn, you mostly lose control. You aren't encouraged to go fast in this game. However, you are encouraged to do objectives fast, and with some missions I believe this works to the game's benefit. For example, Lethal Highway's Hero Mission and Airfleet's Dark Mission. In these two missions, you have to chase down and destroy your target before it gets away. There's a variety of enemies that will try to get in your way. You rush through the level trying to manage your ammunition as you kill enemies in an attempt to pick up more ammo to use on your target. This can be fun because when either of your chaos gauges fill up, you get unlimited ammo for a limited time, meaning you can just completely clear rooms full of enemies and just shave down a major chunk of your target's health bar, which is immensely satisfying. Then there's Circuit Park. Despite the intro cutscene being memed to death and the music being the worst track in the entire game, the hero mission here is one of my favorites. You have to help Tails collect 400 rings. Now this can be very anxiety-inducing as you want to collect as many rings as possible without getting hit. I love this because it gives you an adrenaline rush of sorts. You want to pull off some action while going fast, but you also don't want to lose control and accidentally lose rings. It's a mission that gives you a risk versus reward type mentality. But that's not to say that all of the missions are good. In fact, if I'm being completely honest here, I dislike all of the levels that take place on the Space Colony arc, with the worst offender being Lost Impact's hero mission. Look, even as someone who loves this game, I cannot defend this level. It is no doubt the worst mission in the game for very stupid reasons. The level is a huge maze and it's easy to get lost because everything looks the same. If it's your first time playing this mission, you are definitely going to play the level for at least a half an hour, and that's implying you're actually good at the game thus far. Again, the point I'm trying to make here is that I believe Shadow the Hedgehog's mission structure does work, even if there are a few missions that are annoying to complete. It still works, and this works to the story's benefit because even though I don't like how the story is written, I do like how it is presented. The game is kind of like an ARG of sorts. The main plot point of the story is the mystery behind Shadow's past. As you play through the many routes this game has, you get different pieces of the answer, and it all culminates into the last story. And even though it's not a very good ending, it is a very satisfying one. After finally looking at all the pieces, they finally come together, telling us Shadow's complete backstory, and even though it retcons the heck out of Sonic Adventure 2, I do find it satisfying, especially the final cutscene. While staring out to Earth on the Ark where he and Maria used to sit, Shadow looks at a picture of her and Gerald and says this amazing line.
Goodbye forever, Shadow the Hedgehog.
As he walks away throwing the picture like it's nothing. Then the credits roll as we hear Crush 40's Never Turn Back, which is no doubt my favorite song in the whole game, and one of my favorite songs full stop. I love this ending scene because throughout the game we see Shadow go through this inner turmoil of wondering who he is, what his purpose is, and it always seems like no matter what, Shadow doesn't seem completely satisfied. He's only satisfied that he found the answers, but the problem is he's letting those answers define him. That's probably why those endings weren't very satisfying. But in this ending, he learns that he's essentially the son of an alien demon monster used for an experiment gone wrong, leading to the deaths of countless people. Despite knowing that, Shadow doesn't let that define him. He is what defines him. He wants to keep the promise to the person he loved so dearly. Yes, humans took away Maria's life. Regardless, she still loved the planet that they came from. So despite his lust for revenge, Shadow chooses to be a hero at the end. And this gets into a rant I have regarding the character, but we'll save that for later. Aside from that though, I think that's all I have to say regarding the gameplay. Well, almost. Even though I love this game, there is one aspect of it that I dislike very much. And this aspect is so severely bad that this aspect alone could result in someone not liking the game. So even though I gave praise to the morality and progression system, there is a very severe issue regarding it. See this little grid map here? All those little squares represent the levels you play in the game. Each playthrough has you go through 6 levels. However, here's the issue. The last level in each playthrough has 2 separate endings. Now why is this a problem? Well, in order to unlock the last story segment, you need to unlock all of the endings, including the alternate endings in each of the final levels in each route. Meaning you have to play through 60 missions, with 30 of those missions being repeats. I really don't know why the developers went with this idea. Don't get me wrong, I love Shadow the Hedgehog. However, if I'm doing a full playthrough of it where I'm getting all of the endings, it's really annoying just to get to the halfway point because all you're doing is just going to those final stages again but doing the alternate mission just to get to the other ending. It really boggles my mind too because it's such an easy fix that requires little to no effort. I normally hate when content gets cut from a game, but I can say for sure that some of these final bosses could have been cut out. Some of them are just repeats, so I don't get why there are so many different endings. The game should have required you to just play through 30 missions and get 5 endings, then make the last level a super fast Sonic Adventure-esque level where you just have to get to the end of the level. It's less tedious and it just makes more sense. This aspect really bothers me because it ruins the whole game for some people. Like, yeah, you can just pick up the game and play a few different routes and call it a day, but for those who are completionists who actually want to reach the apex of the game's story, it can be a tedious chore. Now, personally, I don't really mind it that much because I love this game and I'll replay it as many times as necessary, but that's just one major critique that really does set the game back a whole lot. Now we're going to be talking about what I consider the best part of the game, the post-game. After you beat the last story, you can basically play all of the levels and all of the bosses at your own leisure, and after all of the skill you've developed through playing all of these levels over and over again, it's time to put your skills to the test and A-rank them. Now understand, I'm not a charity fraud. I'm sorry, I meant completionist. I'm not a 100% completionist. Whenever I play a game, I usually just get the basic any percent ending. In fact, it was just recently that I 100%ed Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, which you can actually watch on my streaming channel if any of you guys want to see that. Wink wink nudge nudge But I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is that I usually never complete a game fully. Shadow the Hedgehog is way different. Considering the fact that you'll be replaying these levels a lot, especially Westopolis, you're going to develop a certain level of skill. So a while ago, I made it a goal of mine to unlock Expert Mode, which is a super hard mode that goes through every level in a linear fashion. Now I could have just used gecko codes on an emulator, but I wanted to do it legit, and on my physical console no less. So I played, and I played, and I played. And after playing Lost Impact for what felt like a million times, I finally unlocked Expert Mode. And it was one of the most satisfying gaming moments I've ever had. And I loved it. I mean, don't get me wrong, some missions are BS and very tedious, but a lot are really fun and satisfying to beat. And Expert Mode itself is pretty fun. I won't lie, it's kind of funny to have people like the President and the Gun Commander of all people wishing Shadow luck on his training, but I digress. Expert Mode is everything you would expect it to be. It's basically a super hard version of all the levels, and I don't have much to say, it's really fun. You do have to restart if you get a game over though, so that's kinda lame, but meh, that's a minor issue. Anyway, let's wrap up this review once and for all. So I've talked about my personal history with the game, I talked about the controversy the game had endured when it was announced, I've stated my praises and critiques for the game. What else more can I say? Well, I think I can do a little bonus chapter here and talk about my love for the Shadow character. Shadow the Hedgehog is probably my favorite character in pop culture ever, and honestly, I couldn't give you a definitive reason why. I mean, yeah, there's the obvious stuff like the design and the fact that he does cool stuff, but I think it's more than just that. This game made me really fall in love with the dark and edgy. In fact, this game was the reason alone that I became an emo kid during my high school years. Even though it was kind of cringe in hindsight, I liked how dark and edgy Shadow came across. I like how he has this inner turmoil he has to deal with, and in the end, he moves on from it. That's why in Sonic 06, he doesn't even mention Maria, and he's working for Gun. That is proper character development in my opinion. I'm gonna get a little personal here for a second. During my early high school years, I was very depressed. I went to a very toxic school that had toxic teachers and toxic students, and every day I had to deal with the toxicity and utter abuse from other students. And the toxicity going on at that school, and thus my everyday life, sent me into depressive episodes that almost drove me to One thing I always do to better myself is self-therapy. I often look at characters in pop culture and how they deal with their problems, and Shadow was one of my prime examples as a kid. Even though we dealt with different problems, I kinda felt a connection to Shadow. However, instead of dealing with amnesia, I was dealing with loneliness and socializing. I eventually did leave that school and went to a much better one where I was much happier. And when I left my old school, at that moment, I felt like Shadow at the end of his own game, putting the past behind him and moving on towards a better future. It's honestly kinda inspiring. That's kinda why I love the ending song Never Turn Back. It's a song about moving on from your past trauma and starting anew. I know it's silly to get all emotional over a 20-year-old video game starring a low-poly black hedgehog holding a gun, but honestly, this game just means so much to me. It helped me through depressive times, and it helped me discover who I was as a person. Then they completely ruined Shadow by turning him into this antagonistic rival to Sonic, which I really do not like. First of all, Sonic's rival is Knuckles, and it will always be Knuckles. Second of all, I really hate that people, including Sega themselves, consider Shadow an anti-hero. And I'm sorry, but no! Shadow the Hedgehog is a freaking hero. He sacrifices himself at the end of SA2. He saves the world from an alien race in this game. And he joins the military and helps Sonic save the space-time continuum in Sonic 06. Shadow is a hero. He wasn't always a hero, but he became one. Yes, there are endings in this game where you can choose to be the villain, but the canonicity of those endings is questionable at best. I see Shadow as a hero, but then Sonic Boom happened and ruined everything. Shadow's inclusion in Sonic Boom is a mistake, full stop. He is quite literally only there for fan service, and don't get me wrong, I like fan service, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and Sonic Boom doesn't do Shadow any favors. He literally just acts like your average high school bully towards Sonic.
Don't make me laugh. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends. You're not going through that portal. I'm gonna show you just how weak you are.
This is not Shadow, and in Sonic Forces, Shadow's inclusion is also just fan service. He doesn't really do anything in the story other than give infinite incentive for being evil. This is why I'm cautiously optimistic about Sonic X Shadow Generations. I love the fan service that they're giving Shadow. It makes my inner nostalgia go wild. However, I've been burned before, so if it just so happens to happen again, I'll be disappointed, but not surprised. I'm also cautiously optimistic about Shadow's inclusion in Sonic Movie 3. At the time of me writing this, there's only been one trailer out, and it portrays Shadow as a hardcore villain. And while this does work, I seriously hope they give him a good redemption, because like I said before, Shadow the Hedgehog is a hero. The point I'm trying to make here is that while I love Shadow, I only love him in Sonic Adventure 2, Heroes, Shadow 05, and Sonic 06, because everything beyond that, Shadow is exactly what people perceived him as when this game came out. A cringeworthy edgelord who is an anti-hero. Well, ladies and gentlemen and non-binaries, we are officially finished with my Shadow the Hedgehog review. And I genuinely hope you guys enjoyed this video. I spent a lot of time writing it, and even though I don't really have a current time scale for how long this video is going to be, I know for a fact it's definitely going to be my longest review, because it's my favorite game of all time and I have a lot to say about it. And not only that, but having a favorite game of all time that just so happens to be considered one of the worst games of all time, you have to explain your points in careful detail. And I'll let you guys judge on whether or not I did that right. But I'll leave my final words at this. I love Shadow the Hedgehog, both the character and the game. There's a reason the leather jacket I wear all the time is red and black. There's a reason why I have this tattoo on my arm. Because I love this game and I love the character that it came from. If there was one game I had to choose to play for the rest of my life, I would honestly choose this game. Whether or not you disagree or agree is all up to you. Before I end the video, I'd just like to give a special shout out to my channel members, Beta's Bandicoot, Skooma Denisen, and Peter Jensen. Your support really helps the channel a whole lot, and I greatly appreciate it. With all of that said, I'm the Loads17, and it's time to get locked and loaded.